Good evening and welcome to All for United WFC. We are joined tonight by Gareth and by Ben. Ben, how are we?
I'm good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, pal. Still recovering from my sunburn from weekend, but can't complain. How are you, Gareth?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Just a bit of caught the sun at the weekend, so recovering from that.
Oh, good stuff. So, agenda for tonight, then we're going to obviously discuss sort of promotion and relegation. Obviously, last week the league announced the sort of who goes up a league and things like that. So we're going to discuss that. We'll talk about the clubs involved. We'll talk about any thoughts that you guys may have in terms of if you want to sort of keep the current format what we have now, if we want to change it, if there's anything you like to see. And yeah, just a general, like I said, general as per football show. We'll like I say, get everything thrown in there and nice merry mix up. So I'll start with you first, Ben. Obviously, like I say, last week the FA tweeted that they'd sorted out the leagues now. Obviously, Corona last year postponed the season 3/4 of the way through. And then this year they cancelled pretty much tier 3 down, didn't they? Which meant that everything was a mess again. So they decided to, do promotion based on a number of factors. I think finance came into play, points per game, and sort of league positioning for the last couple of seasons. And it's ended up at the minute with the Championship being evened up to 12 teams, which I personally think is great. We saw Sunderland and Watford come up to the Championship. Do you just want to sort of talk to me about that then, Ben? Just add your thoughts on that. I mean, were you surprised it was those two teams? Do you think that's the right call, or do you think maybe there might have been other ways that they could have looked at it and done it?
Probably the right call. I think Watford in particular, I know they've been ploughing a bit of money into their women's side, and it's a decent-ish run football club as well. So I don't know if there'd be another fairer way of doing it outside of having maybe a playoff type thing, but where would you fit that all that in, So I think that's possibly the fairest way of doing it. Looking at the finances of the club, can they financially afford to stay in the Championship? Can they afford to run the costs of playing in that league with players and admin costs and or everything else that's involved with it? So yeah, they probably looked at those two teams. Sunderland have a bit of a history with the women's game anyway. As far as I know, I'm not too.
Oh, you're right.
I am right. I thought so. Hey, see, I do know a little bit, but so they probably looked at Sunderland and looked at their history with the women's game, see what players that they produced over the years, and that have come through their ranks and gone. Yeah, we look at Sunderland. Again, another decent-sized football club. I think that's probably the fairest way of doing it, and I agree with the Championship being an equal number of teams now. Yeah. It's far better because we remember when United were in the Championship and it was uneven teams, and 1 week you sat out and then the rest played, and it was just a bit dodgy to me. I don't like that. I'd rather have a good league, good competitive league with even amount of teams in it. And it should be good, but it's good that there's been a good chunk of teams that have come forward and saying, look, we want to go professional. We want to, can we apply to go up the leagues? Can we go as high as we can? Because at the end of the day, you know what, like, to be in the game of football and be uncompetitive, and languish down in the lower leagues, you want a bit of ambition. You want to go and try and compete with the very, very best that you could compete with at the highest level that you could compete at, and I think it's good to see that a lot more clubs are willing to look at going full-time professional now or looking to step up to leagues instead, looking for the next challenge instead of like languishing there and not giving the players a decent chance to go and make a decent career for themselves. So I'm happy that they've done that, and it's about time. To be fair, it's about time.
Yeah, no, spot on. Gareth, what are your thoughts on that? Then obviously Ben talks about evening it up, but I suppose another thing that's got to come into play is if they can sustain it financially, because what we don't want to see is like Yeovil when they're in the WSL. Went into administration, lost points, and that sent them down, a few leagues. But so what are your thoughts then on, how it's been done, or those teams that have come up?
That was one of the big surprises to me, is that both teams that come up aren't both fully professional. So that was a surprise that Burnley, who are fully professional and did apply to come up, were overlooked because now it could be because of their facilities. Their home ground when we went wasn't particularly great. And when United played there this season, we played at the Lancashire FA headquarters. So unless that was kind of the reason why, but I was surprised that Burnley weren't one of the teams that came up. Sunderland, like you say, I think were an obvious choice. The history that club has and the players they've produced. If some people get their way, some of those players they produce will be in the red shirt next season. So there's a strong, solid history there, and it's good to see them come up. Watford, they're a well-run club, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what their plans are for the future. They must have plans, because I'm pretty sure that the FA requested that they saw kind of what the longer-term goals and aspirations were for each club. But I think, like Ben said, just getting a 12-team championship is a step forward, and we want the best teams in the best leagues. And you can argue that Charlton potentially got lucky last season, but they've sort of kicked on now and have gone pro. So, they dodged a bullet. But I think the teams that have gone down, B's going down, they weren't good enough for the championship this year, and there should be relegation, and it's right that they are being relegated. We just need now for there to be solid progression all the way up the pyramid. And I think teams like Ipswich, we've seen them do well in the FA Cup last year. Southampton had a good run this year. So I think the right teams moving in the right directions. And I think that it's good for the game to have the best sides in the best division. I think if you look at Leicester, they're better than Bristol, I think. So that's movement, good movement. I think probably Watford and Sunderland would both probably beat Bees. So again, movement in the right direction, and it's going to be interesting next year in the Championship. Definitely, clubs like Crystal Palace, I think, might really struggle. They've been relatively comfortable the last few years, but whilst clubs around them, like Coventry and Charlton, are going pro, they're not, or haven't announced that they are going to as yet. I think we're going to start to we are only 2-3 years, I think, away from a fully professional second flight.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we'll sort of come on to the professionalism of it shortly, but I think for me, you mentioned about the likes of Sunderland or Watford possibly being semi-pro or likely being semi-pro. I think it could be interesting, because I think, for me, I had this discussion a few days ago when the news was announced that, to be fair, Watford could probably afford to go pro. Now their men's team has, ended up back in the Premier League. For me, there's no reason why they can't sort of bankroll that now to go professional. Sunderland, okay, still stuck in League One, but let's not forget, Sunderland is still a pretty big club. Okay, we're in the third tier, but in terms of finance, I'm pretty sure they probably have more than enough to, at least make that team maybe half and half, where they take on some pro players like Leicester did last season and some part-time. But again, like you, I think Burnley was the surprising one for me, going full-time, plans in place. I suppose you could possibly argue Fylde. Now, I don't know too much about Fylde in terms of, whether they are fully pro, but I know they do use the men's ground, and, obviously they had to go it alone. They sort of disbanded the team and then brought it back. And I know Huddersfield Town, well, they did say they couldn't afford to come up, but if you look at that league, Sheffield FC, once in the Championship, a big side, Derby and the likes of Stoke had a good season until that got cancelled. So there's potential, for the growth there, really, for me. And I know, Gareth, you mentioned something about on the field and off the field. I think it was something like 75% of the decision was on field. So it was like cup performance, goal difference, points per game. And then the 25% off the field was like the finance, the facilities, all for obviously this license criteria, which it does sort of make it interesting. Ben, I'm going to come to you then. Obviously, Gareth was talking about, teams going up to the third tier. And I think anybody that saw sort of Southampton and Wolves FA Cup run, they were still playing the big teams. I think did they both make the 5th round, maybe something like that, and push teams in leagues above them close. So I think for me, it's probably right that they sort of moved up. But do you just want to talk about that then? Because obviously, like I say, those 3 teams, Ipswich, Wolves and Southampton, obviously 2 of them are men's Premier League clubs. And, for the past 2 seasons, obviously the one just finished and last season it got cancelled, they've pretty much won every single game and absolutely walked their league. So do you think that's about right then, that they sort of come up and, it's been done fairly that way?
Well, if they've been walking the leagues, man, until they've got curtain time from the pandemic, then you probably are right for them to come up, because as I said before, what fairer way is there to settle it other than maybe doing playoffs? But when you're going to have time, to do playoffs and stuff like that, and one-off playoff games or whatever, just it's probably not the fairest way you can settle it either, because one team could feel aggrieved, it's not been over a full league season and what have you, So it probably is, mate, the fairest way with that. And as you said, that some of them are big, huge men's sides as well in the Premier League that have got the money. I mean, Wolverhampton Wanderers themselves, mate, they've consolidated themselves in the Premier League. They have the money there, and they're on about, doing Molyneux more, expanding Molyneux. So there's definitely money there from these teams, And it's good to see that they're willing to put the money into the women's sides as well, because how many times we've been sat here being critical of Premier League clubs for not putting the money in or refusing to put the money into their women's sides.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that. I mean, Southampton, another big football club, it's good to see that they're willing to put some money in, It's really pleasing to see, mate, because at the end of the day, we all want this game to grow as best as it can. And unfortunately, you can't do that without a bit of financial backing. And a lot of these are associated with the men's sides, so it's only right that they give a little bit of money, to help the women's sides financially over a course of a season, with it being facilities, players, and whatever else that they need money for, So it's really good, just pleasing to see that women's football is getting more and more recognition and more respect from the football clubs that are running these women's sides. Because, listen, the last thing any football club wants is, I think, negative PR by saying, look, we've got, for example, for argument's sake, Southampton, we've got a women's side, but we don't really care about them. They're just using our name, borrowing our name.
Yeah.
You don't want to see things like that. You want to see them trying to integrate the sides into the men's or into the overall structure of the football club as best as they can. There shouldn't be any divide, because, like we say at Manchester United, we're Manchester United. It's not Manchester United men, Manchester United women, Manchester United Academy. It should be all Manchester United. We should be all one football club, And I think it's pleasing to see that it will help. Honestly, it will help big time to grow the game at all levels, and even down to the amateur levels, when they can see that there's stepping stones. Football clubs are starting to take the women's game seriously. There can be a career in women's football for us. Not for us, but for the girls that are looking at wanting to go fully professional in the women's game. They can make a career out of it without having to try and juggle 2 or 3 jobs in the background and trying to have the funds themselves to pay things like training and equipment, football boots, and whatever else. So long may it continue, mate. I think the more football clubs that can plough more money into their sides, the better, to be fair. Instead of going, we haven't really got the money, they're only using it, you're only using our name, borrowing our name. I mean, how bad does that look on you when you're coming out and saying, they're really borrowing our name, we don't really care?
Yeah.
Why don't they borrow your name in the first place then, if you don't really care, So it's pleasing, mate, and honestly, it'll help the game grow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. I think you only have to. I mean, I sort of think down the pyramid, and I'm going to give two examples and sort of bring Gareth in on this. But you know, AFC Bournemouth, who obviously again, recently Premier League side, they were given a promotion from Tier 5, so they're now in Tier 4. But you think again, with a little bit of investment from the men's side, think where they could be. But Gareth, I'm going to talk to you about sort of Notts County, because I know obviously they were a former WSL team until financial issues, and they've sort of started again because the men's side pulled the funding. Obviously, the men's side struggled and went out of the Football League, but Notts County went right the way down to Tier 6 and have now been given a promotion to Tier 5. So it just goes to show, doesn't it, that even, like Ben said, without a men's sort of backing, it does get very, very difficult, doesn't it, to, get up that pyramid, which we all want to see to expand leagues.
Yeah, I think it does generally, but there are examples of teams where they are either supported by a men's team that is non-league in Coventry and Lewis are both supported by non-league men's sides, and also teams that kind of do it completely independently. London City Lionesses, they're not bankrolled by a men's team, and Durham aren't either. So, that's 4 championship sides that don't have this backing from a men's team. So, it absolutely helps, and I don't think you'll get any of those clubs making it sort of to the sort of top half of the WSL unless there's kind of serious investment from outside.
Yeah.
I think the issue we have at the moment in the women's game is being able to be sort of sustainable. The one you get in isn't going to be enough in order to kind of support the team financially. And hopefully with the Sky deal, that's going to change, but that's only for the WSL. So there is also then a risk that those WSL teams get however much money they're getting from Sky, and the gap between the WSL and sort of the Championship widens, which we don't want to see. I think clubs can look at Durham as much as we had a rivalry with them when we were in the Championship, because they've not really kind of been close to getting relegated. They've been a solid Championship club for a long time, and I think they could be an example of how other teams could do. What we want, like Ben said, is for the clubs. Crystal Palace, we want Crystal Palace to be Crystal Palace, and we want the backing from the club. It's not the backing from the men's team; it's backing from the club, and I think it's part of the game. Everyone's going to have to accept that the majority of the money being brought into the club is going to be from the men's game, just because there's more money in it, there's more interest in it at the moment, and therefore that's why TV companies are willing to pay hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah.
But we want to see kind of an even distribution, or a reflected distribution of the value of the club. We don't want to see players every year getting 1-year deals. We want to see a bit more security, and that's going to come with the money. I think we're starting to see more 2-3 year deals being given out, and hopefully that becomes the norm. But again, that's going to take time, and it's going to take money to do that.
Yeah, I'm just going to stick with you then, Gareth, for this, as I'm going to move on to sort of the Championship, and I know you talked about maybe the likes of Palace may struggle with it going full time. Now, I believe next year that Lewis are also joining Charlton and who's the team now, Coventry, in going full time. So that kind of pretty much puts most of the league. Now, obviously, you look at Blackburn that finished 9th, and obviously Palace they did okay, 7th. But do you worry that maybe those two teams, unless they invest, get left behind in terms of that Championship? Because like I say, now if you look at that league next year, assuming Bristol stay full time, that's probably 3/4 of the league full time. Do you see that being a problem for those teams, or do you think they may be forced into sort of half and half? Maybe half of the players or a few players may have to go full time and some part time in order to compete.
I think then them two clubs are going to be in a relegation battle for me at the moment. I think even if they decide, now that they're going to go full time, they've not had time to get that transition right. Those two clubs are going to be down towards the bottom end, and I think they'll probably be down there with Watford and Sunderland as well. I think the advantage is at the moment, and there are pros and cons to this, is the fact that only one club gets relegated.
Yeah.
So you can have a really poor season and you can just about scrape by. And I think that's probably what I think will happen to Blackburn. Blackburn made good additions in January. And I think they'll, they've not made any sort of massive additions yet, but I think they'll make good additions again throughout the summer. The window opens this week, so I think we'll start to see movement there. There's a lot of players knocking around. We've seen the release lists, we've seen the retained lists, and most clubs in the Championship are letting kind of 6, 7, 8, 9 players go. So there's players around, and I think they probably will struggle, but I think. I think one of them will. I think one of them will go down. I'm going to back the two sort of promoted clubs to stay up. I think even though Palace finished a bit higher, based on the players they've got and the players they've released, I think Palace are probably they'd be my pick to go down at the moment before any transfers have made. So don't quote me on that in a year's time because it might change by September.
And never mind a year's time, you'll have viewers screenshotting you from fans or saying, "Oh well, Gareth said this in June, and look at it now." But no, I think right. It's one of them, isn't it? Like you say, we don't know recruitment yet. Not every club has announced the release list. Obviously, nobody's announced the incomings yet because transfer window isn't open. But Ben, I'm going to come to you then because obviously we're talking about clubs becoming full time. Do you think, obviously, let's say, we'll put this into a scenario. Let's say every Championship club, not the season coming up, but for 22-23 goes pro. Do you think there could be a danger that it might become more difficult if you are in the 3rd and 4th tier to reach that? And I'm thinking in terms of, again, finance, because it's going to be very, very competitive. You see now in the men's game, Championship clubs at the top end, they're chucking ridiculous amounts of money to get into the Premier League. Do you see that possibly being an issue in the women's game? Like I say, with a fully pro Championship. I mean, listen, like Gareth said, I agree. I think it's probably a couple of seasons off at least. But do you think there is a danger of maybe tier 3 clubs being sort of cut adrift or struggling to sort of make it without the finance that they can throw at it to be able to get up into that Championship?
Very possibly, mate. Very possibly. But then again, you've got to look at the FA then. You've got to say to the FA, how are you going to financially, I don't know, can you help these clubs in a way to try and challenge to get into the Championship if it goes all fully pro? The other way you've got to look at it as well, if the team's getting relegated out of the Championship, is that going to, if they're going all fully pro and they're going into a semi-pro league or whatever, back down in there, how's that going to affect that team financially? How's it going to affect players as well? Because you've got to think, are they going to let players go? They're going to have to let players go. So it's a difficult one because I'm used to the men's game, as everybody knows. I'm not clued up like you and Gary from the women's game. But in the men's game, everything's fully professional. So, from your Premier League all the way down to League 2, it's all fully professional. And then it's when you get down to the non-league football, and then then it gets a bit, sketchy from there. But it all depends, mate. It's like I was picking up a Gareth's point. People like Durham and Lewis and all that lot, because they don't have a big Premier League men's club or a big Championship men's club. Can they sustain being professional? A fully professional outfit in the Championship. Season upon season. Are the costs going to get greater? The more teams are looking to bridge that gap to get into the WSL, and that's exactly the same in the 3rd tier. Then is it going to become too much of a financial strain for some of these football clubs to keep the doors open to have a team? Because some people might turn around, because you know how fragile the women's game is as it is now. They might turn around and say, "This is just too much money. How can we afford it?" If the money does not dripping down, because I'm assuming Sky Sports deal is only dripping down to the Championship, a little bit of that money. So you've got to look at the FA and see what they have to say, and how they, because it's their leagues at the end of the day. How are they looking financially long term to support the clubs that maybe don't have the big men's backing, maybe don't have the cash to burn. So I don't know. We shall see, I suppose. But it is a bit of a worry for me, though. And as I said, as I touched upon it before, it's also a worry for teams dropping out of the Championship back into the third tier. And if the third tier is not fully professional, like we said, it's still semi-pro. That there's players' livelihoods at risk. Then where they're going to go. And can they sustain being full-time professionals in a semi-pro league? Because you're going to have to try and find a job and juggle jobs again. And it just seems a bit of a mess at the minute, the way it's working. Surely, at least 3 or 4 of your levels have to be all professional for me. So it's a bit of a level across the board, instead of having 2 professional leagues and then your 3rd, your 4th, and your 5th tiers all the way downwards, struggling to try and bridge that gap financially. But I suppose that's the great challenge. We've got to wait and see what happens. But I really want to see what the FA are going to do to help clubs that are not got the big backing, that have not got the cash to try and follow, or to try and challenge. That's the word. To try and challenge the teams in and around them that might have the cash on the hip, that have a little bit of money to throw about. Because there's some really fantastic football clubs, even in the lower tiers, battling away, and it's only fair, competition. It's only fair competition that they should be able to, if they win their league, there shouldn't be a barrier financially to step up to the Championship. There shouldn't be that barrier financially. The FA should say, well, if you've not got the funds to go into the Championship, how about we fund you for a season?
Yeah.
And then you've got a season then to try and self-sustain yourselves, to try and find sponsorship and to find ways of generating that money. I don't know. It's a massive question. It's a massive ask on the FA to how are you going to do it? How are you going to sustain teams going up and down the leagues if only 2 leagues are going to be fully professional? And how are teams going to be able to afford to try and compete to get into the top 2 leagues? So it's all about the money again, pal, isn't it? Everything's about money these days.
It's interesting you saying that, because I'm thinking now, when you said about a couple of pro leagues. I mean, we've got sort of 1.5 or 1 3/4, haven't we? We've got WSL and the Championship, which sort of begs the question to me. Like you say, I think if the FA can incentivise it, you talked about maybe could they fund it through terms of maybe a loan or something. But I think for me, the responsibility is on them. At the end of the day, it's their league and their pyramid. So it's like either sell up to somebody that can attract better finance and sponsorships, or find some, sponsorships. I mean, listen, they've started and they've found a TV deal, but the TV deal is not going to filter down tiers 3, 4, 5, and 6, is it? So, it's great in terms of if you're looking at the top 2 leagues, but it's like, where's the sort of the looking after tiers 3 downwards? And I know this is something that we've spoke about in past shows, haven't we, with Stu? He's been quite vocal on this, because I think he lives down Portsmouth way, doesn't he, and sort of watches them. And he's sort of, he's had links with Southampton and things. But for me, like you say, I think at least 2, possibly 3 in the future potential leagues. Now, how you do it, who knows? Finance obviously plays a huge part. But I think it's one of them where now, for the good of the game, we've got to really get something, sort of rocking and rolling, so to speak. And I think with time and finance, does come the better leagues and your greater exposure. And hopefully, we can see. I mean, listen, we all want expanded leagues, and I'm going to move on to that in a minute. But I think, at least it's a start by evening up the championship. But again, from a fan's point of view, we don't want to see clubs suffering or struggling to get up. So if there is that finance and some incentives where it gives clubs a bit more flexibility with spending that money, then absolutely, I think that's something we've got to look into. I'm going to sort of go on to now then sort of, relegation and promotion then. With the current up now, we have 1 up and 1 down from the WSL and the same for the championship. Now, if we start with the WSL, it used to be, it was a few years back, and it had, 2 teams that come up from the championship into the WSL. There was one rare exception where 3 teams came up, and I think that was the year that Everton were there with Yeovil and Bristol. But I think, do you want to see, or do you have any proposals, Gareth, for anything? Would you maybe keep it 2 and 2? Keep it 2 and 2. Expand it to 2 and 2, or would you like to see some sort of playoff? Sort of, I think of rugby in the Super League where they have the playoff between Super League and the division below. Have you sort of got any thoughts on that for maybe making it better or at least more entertaining for fans to expand that league?
Yes, I think I'm not sold on the idea of 2 up, 2 down at the moment, purely because I think that we'll just end up seeing a lot of yo-yoing. We'll end up seeing going up, going straight back down, going straight back up, and we don't want to see that. Great as it is for Norwich fans in the men's game to go into the Premier League every 2 years, to get relegated 12 months later is pretty hard.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of a playoff. So the team that comes bottom, the team that comes top, they're promoted, they're relegated. The team that comes second, bottom, second, have a playoff. You can have it 2-legged if you want it 2-legged, or play it somewhere neutral.
Yeah,
pretty sure if you had a promotion relegation playoff, I don't think you probably want it at Wembley because I don't think it's going to get an awful lot of people go. But if it was somewhere convenient, I'd go. I'd watch that. So I think that's probably going to be the happy medium, and I think it works. The Bundesliga have that model. They have 2 teams relegated, and then the team that comes 16th, I think it is, they go into a relegation playoff with the team that comes 3rd in the Zweite Bundesliga. So, it's worked. And I think it leads to some interesting things that happen there, because inevitably you're going to have a team that's in form against a team that's not in form.
Yeah.
And that's going to even out any differences in quality between the two. So, I think if it was me in charge for a day, that's probably what I would do if you gave me the task of sorting out promotion and relegation. I think it makes it interesting because that team in the WSL can have a chance to save their season, and that team from the Championship has the opportunity to get that promotion and get into the WSL. The interesting thing would be how it's celebrated. Can't imagine finishing second bottom and being given a playoff trophy. It's going to please many fans, but I think it's entertaining, and I think it gives teams the opportunity to make that progression that we want to see.
Yeah, and Ben, yourself, have you got any ideas, or maybe similar to Gareth, different, or maybe to add something else in there? Would you just throw it up to be like a bidding sort of war, like they do with the licenses and like they had done, for example, when West Ham were allowed to do that, and they said, just apply for a place in there to grow the league. So what are your thoughts on that then, in terms of, like I say, just talking WSL for the minute?
Definitely not a bidding war. Like I said on the show at the weekend, football should be settled on the football pitch, not in courtrooms, bidding wars, or in boardrooms, whatever. It should be settled on the football pitch. I like the ideas of the playoffs, man. I think the playoffs are quality. One of the richest games in world football is the men's playoffs in the Championship in the Premier League. Do you know what? What I do love is teams. You get a good number like in the Premier League. You get a few teams going up, a few teams going down. If only the leagues were a little bit bigger, if only there was more full-time professional football clubs across the footballing pyramid, because I like to see maybe 2 going up automatically, and then 1 coming up in a playoff situation, whether they play off against the bottom of the league side or whoever, to come up, or if the bottom of the league side stays in the league, if they win that playoff game. Just something that's settled on the football pitch. But at the minute, I think 1 up, 1 down is probably the right way to do it. Because there's not that, because of the lack of fully professional teams and lack of a fully professional leagues across the pyramid at the minute. Because you've got to look at finances as well. You could be in a position to come up and you haven't got the finance, and then you're stuck again, unless there is an FA incentive, where they maybe, as you said earlier on, give them a bit of a loan to come up. But I like the idea of promotion and relegation. That's the way football should be. And it'll make more games exciting as well. You're fighting for your life. You're battling for your life. Because the only problem I do see with 1 up, 1 down is it takes away a little bit of that relegation dogfight, the battle. You know what I mean? You've only got 1 team fighting for its life to go down. Whereas you've got a couple of teams down there, you might see they might try a bit harder in some of the games, But I agree with Gareth. I think 1 up, 1 down, and then it'd be interesting to see how they go about it. But I do like the playoff ideas. And even if they do, as you said, start off with playing the team that finishes bottom of WSL versus the team that finishes second in the championship. That's the way they want to do it, and do a playoff. For argument's sake, I'll chuck West Ham. I'm not saying they're going to finish bottom of WSL, but I'll chuck them in there. Say they finish.
Sorry, West Ham fans.
Yeah, sorry, West Ham fans. Say they finish bottom of WSL next season, and I don't know, for argument's sake, Durham finish runners-up in the championship, just for argument's sake. Wouldn't that be a good game of football to watch?
Absolutely.
Like a playoff final, you don't have to play at Wembley or something, but some sort of neutral venue somewhere you could have a little playoff final there, Plenty of decent grounds to hold one of those sort of things. I'd like to do with the Conti Cup every season, where they seem to have a decent ground, a decent Premier League Championship size ground, League One size ground where they could play. I just think it'll also attract a few more sponsors as well to the game. When you say, "Oh, it's a playoff, is it?" Because sponsors love a bit of a playoff final, don't they? They love that sort of thing. So maybe that's another way of financially making it viable as well. If the sponsors are willing to chuck a little bit of money to the winners. So for example, Durham beat West Ham. Because obviously Durham full time. Sorry, did somebody say? Are they still part time?
I think they are full time.
They are full time now.
I'm pretty sure they are, because they had an agreement with the university to use some pitches there.
Right.
So they use the uni pitches and facilities, and I know they did get a big sponsorship big load of sponsorship money off a law firm as well. So I'm pretty sure Durham are full time.
Right, but then again, anyway, just to financially make it viable, they can come up to the WSL. The winner gets a pot of money from the sponsors, and maybe the FA might chuck a little bit of cash into that as well. So it makes it financially viable for that sort of team to then be able to go up and at least compete, even if it's just one season of WSL, because you never know, they might come back straight back down again. But but we'll see how it all pans out, innit? But I do honestly like the idea of having a playoff, and hopefully we get to a position in maybe the long-term future where you can have like 3 or 4 teams then going up and down, as the leagues, hopefully the more teams that go fully professional, and the more the leagues start hopefully gaining more exposure and more sponsorship deals themselves, and hopefully the more the women's game grows as well, we could be in that situation where you can see more teams going up and down between the leagues. But at the minute, it's all about the money, you know. So, but it's something that hopefully in the future I'd love to see something like that across all the leagues, you know, where there is a little bit of a fairer opportunity for more teams to go up, more teams coming down, you know. All right, fair enough. It's not so fair on the teams coming down, I suppose, but at least it gives more incentive to the teams in the lower divisions to again better themselves. You know, creates more competition that way. So we shall see, mate. Hopefully, in the long term future, I'm hoping that's what the FA's plan is. But you boys know, right? We could be here sat all day trying to second guess the FA sometimes. So we shall see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to sort of I'll move on to the championship, and I'll come to you, Gareth. I think it's interesting because I know Ben mentioned Durham's name, and I think what's interesting for me, and listen, I ain't a big fan of Durham, and I know you boys probably aren't either, but it's one of them where you kind of look at them, and I don't know if maybe feeling sorry for him is the right word, because I don't. But if you were a fan of Durham and you look this year, they were obviously better than they were last year. They pushed Leicester pretty much to the last two games of the season. I think the Leicester beating Durham was obviously the definer. You know, I think had Durham won that, you maybe, you know, you're taking that to the last game. But I think if you're a Durham, you could probably feel a little bit aggrieved that having done all that hard work and come closer than the year before and built your team, that, you know, you're not actually going up. So I don't know if you, like you say, Gareth, if you want to sort of talk about that in terms of championship, because again, I think, you know, playoff would be good, and like, you know, we've all discussed the second bottom of the WSL. But another thing as well, teams coming up into the championship, you know, I've been critical of this for years. The North and South in the third tier, you win your league just to make a playoff, and yet you're not even guaranteed promotion, which is, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. You know, you're a team that wins the South playing a team that wins the North, and then you get a league trophy but no promotion unless you beat the team from the other region, which, you know, I was critical of this because it happened to Blackburn. I think it took Blackburn 3 attempts. They lost the final against Tottenham and a final against Charlton before finally getting up to the championship. But you just want to talk about sort of all of that then and sort of summarise if you can.
Yeah, so I'll start with Durham. Again, you know, not a massive fan of Durham, but I respect them, and I respect sort of how they kind of progressed over the last few years. And I think, you know, that having that playoff would give teams like Durham and Sheffield United last season as well, you know, had a cracking season before it was cancelled that saw Villa come up. So it does give those teams who kind of push all the way an opportunity to come up. I'm really not a fan of only having the league title winners go up. And yeah, I think come on to your second point with kind of promotion and relegation from the championship again, sort of relegation. I agree. I think, you know, you could pretty easily have two teams go from the championship, because I think the gulf in quality between the championship and the National League isn't particularly big at the bottom of the championship and the top of the National League, sort of more specifically. So I think definitely, you know, you can have two teams go down, and then the two championship winners, or the two National League winners rather, get promoted. It means that every single year, the FA are going to have to jig around the teams in each division, but they do that. The National League do that for the Men's National League North and South. Kings Lynn, for example, are in the National League North, which is, you know, means that they probably, or when they were in that division, they're in the National League now, but they came from the National League North. So if you saw, for example, you know, if Blackburn and Palace went down, that's relatively straightforward. Palace go into the south, Blackburn into the north. But if you had, say, Durham and Blackburn go down, you're not going to put Blackburn into the National League South. So it would involve rejigging that, which is a bit of paperwork, and it means that any preparation that you might do, if you're one of the clubs in the Midlands, any preparation you do one season may be completely relevant next season. You may be going into a completely different league, which for a part-time club can be difficult. But I think, you know, we need to kind of open up these divisions and be able to have teams conceivably be able to get a plan and go forward. Because, it isn't fair for a team to win the title 3 years in a row and not get promoted, or get promoted in the third year. I know the argument that would be, but they didn't win promotion. They won the title, but not promotion. But for me, that should just be one and the same.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's a way to go. I think things are moving in the right direction. We've sat here and we've complained for 45 minutes, but I think things are moving in the right direction. It's great that we're seeing more professional clubs. It's really good that actually there has been upward movement of teams that do deserve it. They've not kind of just given a promotion out to somebody and you've looked at it and gone, how on earth have they been awarded that?
Yeah.
So, credit where it's due. The FA have done all right here. They just need to keep doing all right, and hopefully we'll see the game start to get bigger, and hopefully one day, lads, we can go to a playoff final.
I know, wouldn't that be a dream? Playoff final, and we'll just we'll rock up. Doesn't matter who it is, as long as it's not Liverpool. We'll rock up and we'll go. Great idea.
We can rock up if Liverpool are in there. We'll just, as long as it's not against City or something, we can just cheer for the opposition.
That's a great shout. Yeah, good idea. I'm with you on that one. Just before we finish, then I'm just going to wrap it up because news broke on Sunday about the PFA Player of the Year and the Young Player of the Year. So I'll come to you first, Ben, on this. Frank Kirby won the PFA Player of the Year. Had an outstanding season. I think it's been great to see her back. Cause I don't know if you're maybe aware of her story. She struggled with injuries. She'd struggled mentally. She looked at one point like she may have called it quits. She's come back this season and she's been absolutely sensational. Do you just want a word on that? I mean, I'm assuming you agree with the choice of her. I mean, the other option was possibly Sam Kerr or Vivian Miedemar, but do you just want to briefly touch on that with Fran?
Fran deserves it for me, mate. Sam Kerr, you're having a laugh. She couldn't have barred out 10
She was nominated,
paces.
pal. Don't shoot me.
Oh, no, I'm not shooting you, mate. How's she in there? No, I'm not having that. But I agree with Vivian Miedemar, by the way. She's been absolutely fantastic again. But Frank Kirby, mate, what a player. And I know what Chelsea fans will start going, but you used to call her an Olympic diver, Ben. Well, she is an Olympic diver, but, but can't take away from the fact that she's a quality player. And for me, I think she's definitely probably England's best player, to be fair. Lioness's best player. Team GB's best player, without a shadow of a doubt. And it just goes to show, in a team full of stars that Chelsea have, the star that shines the brightest is Frank Kirby. So you can have all the superstars in the world. You can have all the Sam Kerrs. You can have all the other people they've got that sign or who they want to sign. But it's good to see an English player doing so well and to come back from the illness that she had and from doubting if she ever wanted to play football again. Mate, what a story! What a comeback story! This is what football is all about. You seem to be on the depths. Down the dumps, wanting to give up. Everything's going against you. So coming back and mate, it's like she's never been away. She's coming back. She's come back. To be fair, I'd even say, obviously, I'm not being a women's football fan for as long as you and Gareth, but for me, I think she's come back even better player than the one that left.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, I can't speak highly enough of her, mate. If there's one Chelsea player I do respect, is Frank Kirby. Even though I did call her, I'll hold my hands up, man. I still don't think it was a penalty, by the way.
We'll not get into that, Ben. We've got.
I know, because I know, mate. But I just wanted to say what a great player she is, and long may it continue, mate. Because she's a fantastic player. She's one of maybe two Chelsea players or three Chelsea players that I'd love to have at United.
Yeah.
I'd snap your hand off just to take Frank Kirby at United. But it's one of those. And I'll shut up now because I'm probably digging myself into a hole. Let Gareth answer your next question.
don't get yourself in any more trouble. But I think it's one of them. Fully deserves it. The only thing I worry about now is that obviously she's in the Olympic squad, and we don't want to, from a selfish point of view, we don't want her to burn out. I'd rather her sort of, I wouldn't say not go, because at the end of the day we're there to compete, but I don't think we've got a chance of going too far looking at the squad. So, I think hopefully she can just not, like I say, not be burned out, have another good season, but not too good a season. And then Euros for me is the big one. I think we've got a real good shot next summer of winning them Euros. So I'd love to see a fully fit, firing Frank Kirby continue this form, or even go better, like I say, as long as it's not past us. Then yeah, it can only be onwards and upwards. But Gareth, I'll let you sort of chat about Fran, and also what I will do is I'll mention the young player of the year, which went to Lauren Hemp. So if you want to talk about obviously Lauren as well, because our Tooney was nominated. It was a difficult one, the young player of the year, because there was so many good players in there, and for all Tooney's credit, I think for Lauren to come back again from a serious injury, to have a season where her assists and her goals for City were pretty much level and on par with each other. It pains me to say and admit, because she's a rival player, but she's a decent young player. But do you just want to chat about both of those and sort of give your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I had no complaints really about either of them. I'm looking forward to when Benny gets that Frank Kirby shirt that goes behind him. The amount of he waxed lyrically there about how good he is. So it's not really anything I can add. I think with Lauren Hemp, what's really important to mention is that she is 20 years old. She's only 20, and she is the first player, male or female, to win the same award 3 times. Whether that's PFA Players Player in the men, PFA Young Player in the men, Women's Young Player or Women's Player, no one has won the same award 3 times. Giggs won it twice. Rooney won it twice. Hemp has gone and won that 3 times now. So I think that shows how good she is. And yeah, you know how I feel about players that come from my neck of the woods.
Norwich massive players.
Well, North Walsham, but it's around there. Came from the Norwich Academy, so it's great to see. And I think the only downside to Lauren is that she plays for City. But hey, credit where it's due. She's a great player, and I think if you look at a lot of that City team, there's a lot of good young players there. And I know people sort of say that Lionesses are Man City FC, but I think when you look at the players that they've got in that squad with Roebuck and Hemp and Kelly as well, they're going to be they've not, although not necessarily produced those players, they've definitely kind of taken them and they've grown into be the quality players that they are because of City. And I think every other club in the WSL should be looking at what City are doing at the Etihad campus and look to be doing similar things. We're doing it with Tooney to a degree. She's come on incredibly well over the last year, and hopefully we'll see more of that next year. But I think Lauren is a special player, and to won it 3 times before your 21st birthday is no mean feat. And like you say, next year at the Euros, with a front 3 of who knows who's going to get in that front 3. It's going to be tough. You're going to have people like Hemp, Kelly, Kirby, you imagine will be in there, but then you're going to have people like LJ, Salmon, Tooney knocking on the door as well. So and that's not even mentioning people like White and England and Paris who are all quality players as well. So I think the Euros next year are going to be interesting. Make sure that when the tickets go on sale in the summer, I try and get one at Wembley for the final, and hopefully we're there.
Is he frozen?
I think he might have frozen, looking like.
All I've got is a smiling little mug.
His little chubby cheeks with that little grin on his face.
Oh, we've got a green screen now. Green screen.
I think he's back.
Oh, is he back? Are you back, Matt?
I am back. Sorry, I just it was slowly coming through. It went a bit robotic, so I didn't know if he'd stop speaking. But no, I agree. I think Lauren, like you said, 3 awards before you're 21. I mean, she was somebody I saw as like a 16-year-old with Amy Palmer at Bristol under Willie Kirk, and I think very, very good player. It does make it interesting, like you say, for the Euros, because I think that's going to be very competitive. I mean, listen, if we stop taking the absolute what's the word? The absolute has-beens and liabilities, and start picking these new younger players, then we might stand a chance. But it is certainly going to be very, very, very competitive, and I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, shout out to Fran and Lauren for, I say, their PFA nominations. Cautious of time, so what I will do, boys, is I'll wrap it up. But massive thanks for joining me. We are back on Thursday as our next show, 7:30 p.m. And what we've done is, because we have a special guest on Friday, we've swapped Thursday and Friday around. So the fans forum, for those of you that are on it, or those of you that tune in for that show, is Thursday the 10th at 7:30 p.m. Friday the 11th, John is coming on with Mia Eriksson, who's a Scandinavian football sort of journalist and correspondent. And then Saturday, myself and Ben are back at 8 p.m. So as usual, if you follow the All for United Twitter, we do put out schedules and pin those as well. There's regular tweets throughout sort of the week. And yeah, just keep an eye on socials. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as well if you've not done already, and spread the word. And we will see you on Thursday. Cheers, boys.